So can we start?
This meeting is being recorded.
Very good evening to all. So we are together once again for the fourth session of the series of webinars that we started off from December 2022. And on the agenda of the Indian College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists to have capacity building and awareness on the research methodology. So we started with the basics, the study designs, starting from the descriptive and followed by the RCTs. And then last one was on the basics of biostatistics. And today we have on the secondary research, and that is systematic review. So I'm really very happy to welcome Dr. Lakshmi Srikhande, who is the chairperson of ICOG. And as always, I thank her for taking up this step because time and again we've been trying to get through, but this forward step has been taken by Dr. Lakshmi. And thank you so much for that. And I invite you to deliver the welcome address, please. So I
Thank you.
want to, Dr. Lakshmi, before you start, I wish to just project the slides so that,
There is no need to show my slide. Uh,
uh, just a minute, please. I think we can. So this is the program for the day. We are very happy to be supported by Dr. Rishikesh Pai, who is the president of FOGSI, and this is our own Dr. Lakshmi Srikhande, and then we have editor-in-chief Dr. Geeta Balsarkar, and we also have Dr. Suvarna Khadilkar, who was the professor and head department of Obs and Gynae, and she was the earlier editor of Jogi. So, warm welcome to you, Dr. Lakshmi. Over to you, please.
Thank you. As already you have said, Dr. Radhika, we started from December 2022, and this has been conceptualized by from FOGSI side, Dr. Madhuri Patel, from Jogi, Dr. Geeta Balsar, who is editor-in-chief, Dr. Suvarna Khadilkar, who is emeritus editor of our Jogi, myself, ICOG chairperson. But when we conceptualized it, we were looking for a dedicated worker who will really form a module and deliver out this project, and we found that person in Dr. A.G. Radhika, and I'm so happy that I told her first teach basics so that everyone knows what you are teaching, and then gradually you build up and go on to the secondary research and whatever you might be having tertiary research. So it is going great guns, Radhika, and I'm so happy that today you have come out with the systematic review part 1, and you have brought galaxy of speakers who are subject experts. So without taking names, I would like to welcome all the speakers, chairpersons who are here to teach us about systematic review, and I'm sure next month they will be covering the part 2 so that we all know what all is about systematic review. So without wasting time, I would like to hand over back to Dr. Radhika for start of the scientific session.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Lakshmi. So, I wish to now start by introducing the team. So, this is myself. I am the convener for this program. And with me, Dr. Vaishali Khode Naik. She is the professor and head MER Medical College, Pune. She is a consultant in critical care obstetrics, Ruby Hall Clinic, Pune. And she is extremely accomplished, very well decorated, recipient of many awards. And she is also the master trainer for FOGSI, Violence Against Women's Cell, and she has conducted many national workshops. And she has contributed articles to many books as well as journals. And we also have Dr. Ranjana Sinha. She is the chief consultant gynae clinic at Patna. She is the former head of gynae at East Central Railway, Patna. Executive member of ISOPAP, former joint secretary ISOPAP, and she's held many international national positions. And a warm welcome to you, Dr. Ranjana. She is going to be also conducting the session for the day. So I hand over the floor to you, Dr. Ranjana.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for the kind introduction. A very good evening to respected faculty members and dear participants. Continuing our FOGSI ICOG Jogi web series on research methodology, today the topic of discussion is Systemic Review Part 1. And we have with us eminent speakers discussing different aspects of systemic review and very learned chairpersons with their expertise to add to the subject. Let us begin our first session with our chairpersons. First, I would like to call upon Dr. Anju Pradhan. Madam is Scientist Consultant, Division of RCN, ICMR Headquarters. She has been ex-Deputy Director General, Division of RCN, ICMR Headquarters. Madam is also Director ICMR Cochrane Affiliate Center. Madam is also recipient of Kenneth Warren and Aubrey Shiham Awards and FOGSI AITRP Award. Madam, I welcome you to the session. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Suvarna Khadilkar, Professor and Head OBGYN at Bombay Hospital. Madam is also Deputy Secretary General FOGSI, and Madam has held a number of important positions in FOGSI, like Treasurer FOGSI 2018-2021 and Editor-in-Chief Jogi 2018-2021. Madam's CV is decorated with many awards, a number of publications. Madam is a prolific orator and a keen academician. I had just called Madam. Madam will be joining in 10 minutes. And now I call upon Dr. Ashwath Kumar, Professor OBGYN, Jubilee Mission Medical College, Thrissur, Kerala. Sir is also Vice President-elect FOGSI, and Sir has also held a number of important posts in FOGSI and KFOG. I welcome all the chairpersons to conduct this session and also request all the participants to put up their queries in chat box, which will be taken up at the end of this session. So I hand over the mic to now Dr. Anju ma'am, to Dr. Ashwath sir, to kindly introduce Dr. Radhika, our first speaker.
CV of Dr. Radhika, madam. So I would be, first of all, I thank FOGSI, ICOG, Jogi for inviting me as a chairperson for this session. And respected Lakshmi madam, Radhika madam, and I'm very fortunate to introduce Dr. Radhika. Madam is a national coordinator of clinical research, FOGSI. Madam is a national corresponding editor of the Jogi 21-24, and she is a member of Geneva Foundation of Medical Education Research, Cochrane Collaboration, Campbell Collaboration, Inverted Expert of Cochrane affiliated. She is one of the Cochrane reviewers in India, actually. Very few people are there. She has so many awards to her and she has many publications. I have been associated with Radhika madam for the many research webinars in association with Mehta also. Such a learned person, apt person, as Lakshmi madam told, apt person for conducting this program. And we have today a list of speakers who are the best, and systematic review is something very important to understand. So without any delay, I hand over the mic and the proceedings to Radhika madam to start the first talk on systematic review.
Thank you so much for the kind introductions, Dr. Ashwath. Mine is a very easy task. I'm just going to give a very brief overview and an introduction to the systematic review. So let's start with the basic concept of the reason why, what is a systematic review and what is evidence-based practice. So the evidence-based practice is basically to utilize the best available research evidence with the clinical experience and the patient needs and the expectations. Now, the definition was first given by David Sackett. There are three components to the evidence-based practice: the patient values, best research evidence, and the clinical expertise. And the amalgamation, the central point here is evidence-based medicine. So it's an integration of the research evidence, clinical expertise, and the patient values. So all the three partners here are taken care of. So what is a reliable evidence? It is the unbiased view of truth. So we are forever looking for truth philosophically and literally. And the bias is the difference between the study results and the truth. And we want to remove the bias as much as possible to arrive at the actual truth. So for that, we need well-designed and executed studies, and these help us to get closer to the truth. So why the sudden interest in the evidence-based practice? Because now there is an increasing realization that with increasing clinical experience, there is improvement in the clinical skills. But if this is not accompanied with the updating of the knowledge, it affects the clinical performance. And also there is a huge internet revolution today. There is an access which is there even for the general public and the patients, and they are very much informed. We as clinicians have witnessed that so many times, that the awareness has increased tremendously, and we need to remain at least 5 steps ahead of what is being projected on the internet with the reliable and credible information. So that's why it is important to have access to evidence, and also have the updated knowledge to have the evidence-based practice. Advantages are it minimizes risky clinical practice, optimizes the quality of healthcare, and most importantly, it ensures a uniform standard of care which is auditable, and thereby it helps to formulate good practice guidelines as well as recommendations. However, there are certain practical difficulties in the Indian context, because there are, still many clinicians who are very unclear about what an evidence-based practice is about. So they think it is very difficult to translate whatever is getting said into practice. And very commonly it happens to us because we are actually referring to the Western literature, and the collation of the Indian literature or in the LMICs is hardly accessible, or it is not there. So translating that into practice is certainly a problem in many areas, especially in obstetrics and gynecology. And evidence-based answers to some of the clinical questions are not available, and there is a huge variation in the healthcare practices in India, starting from the various parts of our country and the public and private setups through the entire length and breadth of the country. And there could also be some misconceptions among the clinicians that clinical experience or judgment is ignored in evidence-based practice, which is not the case. And there could be very attractive advertisement by the pharmaceutical companies, and these are especially when unsupported by the scientific evidence. And they catch the younger crowd, especially the resident doctors, and they're very much impressed by their presentations. And most importantly, the people who are in the position of authority, the seniors, they find it sometimes difficult to accept evidence which is contrary to their opinion. So, in my experience, is something that we all have heard. It's a good idea to have a Guru Shishya Parampara, but then we need to be also, today thinking about the available evidence which is available in abundance today. So this is the hierarchy of evidence. This is a pyramid. Classically, I'm sure most of us would have seen that. So the base is by the editorials and the expert opinion, case series, case control, studies, cohort, RCT, systematic review, and the guidelines which have come out of these systematic reviews are the best quality of evidence and translation to practice to be considered. So that is why today we are talking about the systematic review, which is a kind of a secondary research. So I was talking about bias, which takes us away from the truth. So as we go from below upwards, there is a fall in the bias. The bias goes on reducing below upwards, as you can see in this triangle. So the systematic reviews are considered the best form of evidence, and therefore receive the strength of evidence. The recommendation here is much better. There are various types of reviews. I'm not going to go into the detail. Narrative review is something which everybody, I think, traditionally, it is a traditional review that we have been practicing all this while. So there is synthesis of and the findings of literature. The methodology is not transparent, and probably it is not reproducible. Critical evaluation of literature could be a critical review, scoping review. So it typically answers a broad question, does not require critical appraisal, but the basic steps could be, transparent and rigorous as in systematic review. There could be a rapid review where literature search could be, because of the time factor, it may not be extremely extensive. Systematic review is what we are going to talk about. There are various steps in the systematic review, which I'm just going to touch upon in the next slide. And there is an umbrella review, which just takes in all these systematic reviews together. It's focuses on a broad condition or a problem, compiles the evidence from other reviews into one document, and it does not include the primary studies. So what is a systematic review? It is systematically locating, critically appraising, and synthesizing the evidence from scientific studies. So that is, in nutshell, the basic aspect of a systematic review. So it therefore aims to be systematic in its identification of literature, explicit in its statement of objective and methodology, reproducible and transparent. All these 4 points, as you will see throughout the day and in the next session, these are some things which are extremely important for a systematic review, and therefore it takes a little time. So here what happens is results of multiple primary studies which are related to each other are synthesized using strategies that reduce biases and random errors. And these may all, it's not necessary that systematic review has to be, combined with a statistical synthesis, meaning a meta-analysis. It depends on whether the studies are similar enough to be collated together in a meaningful, to result a meaningful outcome. So the advantages are it supports evidence-based practice, identifies the gaps in research. So when you are doing a literature search, you are also in the process of identifying good quality studies which have been done in a particular area, and thereby it also helps us to identify the gaps in research. And it helps to inform clinical policy as well as the guideline formulation. And the benefits of collating evidence, especially where the sample size is small. So you put in so many studies together, good quality studies, it helps us to increase the number of patients, the sample size, and especially so when the evidence is conflicting. 10 studies, 5 this way, and the 5 stating otherwise. So when you combine the two and then you do a statistical analysis, to a large extent, it can help us to arrive at a consensus, or probably, at some point of a final suggestion. And it also provides that further primary research is not necessary. This is a standing example quoted many times, use of the steroids for preterm delivery. So the first study was undertaken in 1972 by Liggins. It was a good quality study, and then followed by a series of studies. By 2001, it was abundantly clear that, by 1999, in fact, it was abundantly clear that no further studies are required and that it could be the standard of practice. However, we as clinicians took so long to have it into the routine clinical practice. Today, dexamethasone is in the World WHO model list of essential medicines. But in the meantime, so many children lost their lives. So it is so important for us to know when the primary research is not required. So the basic steps are: ask a focused question, acquire and identify the sources, appraise the evidence that has been identified, analyze the study characteristics, the quality, the effect size, and the consistency, and finally apply that into clinical practice after dissemination of the review, and then assess, meaning audit it again. So these are the basic steps in a systematic review. We will go through some of these in the next in the session after this, and also in the next one. Limitations of systematic review. Basically, it depends on, it's like, you do not have good quality vegetables, the curry does not come out well. So the quality of the underlying studies and the ones which have been used for the compilation of the final evidence, if the quality of studies is not good, obviously the outcome, the conclusion, the systematic review quality would also not be good. Comparison of interventions with different intensity or duration of scales of studies is a reason for heterogeneity. The relevance of the studies to the questions asked, sometimes it's classically stated that you might find the island, but you may still not be able to find the treasure. So the systematic review may not still address a specific clinical question that the clinician wants to find an answer to. And there could be problems which are related to the statistical approach. If the heterogeneity is more, then the right kind of statistical analysis needs to be undertaken. So with that, I finish my talk. So thank you so much for a patient listening. So we will go into the details of systematic review in the next few talks. Thank you so much.
May I now request Swarna ma'am? Swarna ma'am has joined. Good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am, kindly give your comments.
Yeah, I think
we can hear you, Dr. Suvarna. We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So it's I'm out in the car, so maybe my visibility and audibility may not be that good. But I just want to congratulate Dr. Lakshmi and the entire ICOG team, and in particular Dr. Radhika, who is relentlessly working on these research methodology workshops, and these so much information she has just given regarding systematic review, and I'm sure some more is going to come out in this particular session. And I always feel that if you select the well-designed studies to conduct the systematic review, the outcome that you get, or the information, conclusion, and the analysis that you get is definitely useful to your clinical practice. It makes easier to make a decision on your own practice and patients. But as Dr. Radhika said, that if the original quality of the papers is not good, then the conclusions may slightly differ, and it may not comply with what generally you find in your clinical practice, what is the best. So I think when you choose, the particular study has to be of a certain quality before it is taken for analysis. And I think if it is a properly done systematic review, I think and the meta-analysis, they are the highest quality papers which you can base your decision upon, and you can have your own conclusions and then proceed in your rest of your. Now I always say that when you are writing an article, if you go through a systematic review paper which is already published, wealth of information you will get, and you can then go and cross check the references of those systematic review, where the authors have already analyzed and given their inputs. But you can also go to the original paper and find your own make your own conclusion and analysis, so that you can have your own some guidance or some recommendation for your own clinical practice, and then you can have a paper which is based on that. So I think overall, whatever paper, whatever has been discussed and is going to be discussed in this seminar, I'm sure it is going to help so many of you who have gathered here, who have aspiring authors and who have interest in writing. I'm sure they all will be benefited, and I wish you all the best for the whole of this seminars. And I think Lakshmi is so much in, she's already working in the journal. Dr. Radhika is also working on the Jogi journal, and both of them have such great interest in disseminating knowledge, that what you are saying is the best seminars, the series that they have put up. Thank you so much, Dr. Lakshmi and Dr. Radhika. Thank you and all the best.
Thank you, madam, and kindly stay back. The session is still on. May I request now
Sure.
Dr. Anju Pradhan, ma'am, to kindly introduce Dr. Jayashri.
You are muted, Dr. Anju. You are muted. Please unmute.
Yeah. So a very good evening, all the eminent scientists and practicing gynecologists. And I welcome one and all of the FOGSI ICOG Jogi web series participants as well for this wonderful opportunity. And I'm very encouraged to see the busy clinicians and, surgeons, gynecologists who are joining this web series. And it will certainly improve the kind of the review work that is being outcoming from our country. And it is very essential because systematic reviews, as you know, are the gold standard in the evidence-based medicine and to lead our clinical practice, and they have an impact on policy. Therefore, I think this is a wonderful opportunity, and I congratulate Dr. Radhika for taking ahead this initiative. And she has already conducted a series on study design and RCTs and basic in statistics, and this is the fourth in the series. So congratulations. Dr. Jayashri, who is the next speaker in this session, she's a medical doctor specialized in community medicine from PGI Chandigarh, and she has over a decade's experience in public health teaching and mentoring. She has more than 60 scientific articles, and she is an operational researcher, especially in the field of tuberculosis and menu labeling for non-communicable disease control. And she is very passionate about teaching and coordinator of online free self-paced certificate course on scientific writing. So I welcome Dr. Jayashri to give a talk on PICO, formulate a clear question for a systematic review and basic steps in the methodology of a systematic review. So welcome, Dr. Jayashri.
Thank you, Dr. Anju, for the introduction. Thank you, ICOG, for the opportunity to share my thoughts on PICO and basic steps in conducting a systematic review with this very interesting audience, clinicians who've taken out time for research, and you're already busy. You still have taken out time at the fag end of your day to further your research skills and knowledge. So without much further ado, I think I'll share my screen and begin the presentation. Thank you, Dr. Radhika. I think you've set the stage with your introductory session. So yes, so the review question, like any research, we start with the research question. A systematic review also begins with the review question. And in this lecture, I would like to quickly take you through how to choose a review topic, how to frame a review question using the PCOT format, which we are already familiar with in the context of other research that we do, how to specifically apply it in the context of systematic reviews and meta-analysis. And I'll also quickly list the basic steps of conducting a systematic review. So I think the single most important aspect of any research study is the research question in itself. A question well asked is already half answered, and it's very important to know what you're trying to answer, where you're trying to reach, so that you know when you get there and you get the answer which is as closest to truth as is possible. So quickly about choosing the review topic. So why does it matter? One, most of us, we look for certain endpoints when we start off with a review. One, we want it published in reputed journals. We want it to be recognized and cited by our peers, and we want to add to the knowledge base that is already available on a particular topic. You want it to be funded by agencies. You want to be able to compete and acquire competitive grants. And most importantly, we wanted to make a difference in practice and policy. So this is why we put a lot of emphasis on choosing the right research topic. So where do you look for this? Most of the best research questions come from the problems in your own clinic or your own community practice. It is from there that we get the best of the questions which are most relevant and the ones that definitely need answering. So we get it from our patients, we get it from the community, we get it from reading literature, like Dr. Radhika also pointed out in her lecture. There's a lot of evidence sometimes, but they're conflicting and you're not heading towards a consensus there. So you read literature, and from there you can get questions from talking to peers or to experienced colleagues. And suddenly you understand that there's this commonly asked question for which there is no strong evidence base. From attending conferences, however boring it might be, you sit through multiple sessions in a conference and you might strike at that one question that definitely needs answering through a review. And from new technologies, anything that is coming up and you need enough evidence to further recommend its use or negate it. So, and most importantly, choosing the right question is also important because you don't want to reinvent the wheel. So you recommend a thorough search of existing literature, all known databases, talk to your colleagues, talk to your peers, understand who is working on what, so that you don't want to do something that already somebody else has done. And because systematic review, like any other research or more than other research, it is very time consuming. It is a very intensive process. A lot of expertise and time and money goes into it. So it better be worth it. So that said about choosing the right topic. So you've now decided where to focus your efforts on. So what is the importance of a review question? So if the review is a question, then the conclusion of your review report, that sentence should be an answer to this review question. So what you're going to conclude is going to depend if this is the starting point. Your review question is the starting point. And once you've asked the question, you have to learn to ask it in such a way that a lot of steps in how you will conduct your systematic review becomes automatically clear. For example, from your question, I should be able to decide the eligibility criteria for the studies that will be included, some inputs for my search strategy, data extraction, data analysis, and results interpretation. Inputs for all of this, the direction for all of this is going to come from the way you have framed your research question, your review question. It is also important to give clarity to the researcher, yourself, your team, and the funding agency. So reading your review question, I need to know as a funder or as a fellow researcher, I need to know where you are headed or what should I expect in your results section. What kind of results will your review produce? It also helps travel towards answering the specifics. There's no meandering here and there. So once your question is focused and specific, you are going to answer a very, you're going to also come up with a very specific answer. So this is the PICOT or the format of a review question. I'm sure most of you are already familiar with the PICOT format that we generally use in framing all our research questions. I would just reiterate for the benefit of everyone. So P stands for population. So you are going to spell out the important characteristics of your participants in terms of age, gender, or disease conditions, whatever. I stands for intervention. So this is the main treatment you are interested in. It could be a therapy, it could be a screening test, it could be the intervention that you are interested in. Comparator stands for the control group. In other words, what would you be comparing your intervention with? That is the comparator in PICOT. Outcome is, what is the outcome? Against what outcome are you testing your intervention? Say if it is a therapy, if it is a treatment, what is the outcome you are going to measure to see if this treatment works or not, or if this treatment is safe or not? So that is where you specify the outcomes and how it will be measured in terms of time and effect. Because it is a systematic review and it is a study of studies, you also need to specify what kind of study designs will be included in this particular systematic review. And it's very important to state it upfront so that I understand whether you are doing an intervention study review or a review of observational studies or a review of qualitative studies, or are you doing a review of reviews, an overview? Okay, so it's very important to state what kind of study designs you will be including and the time frame. Now, the time frame could be the year of publication. Over what year are you going to restrict your search to? It could also be the time frame over which you will be measuring the outcomes. So that depends on the context of your review. I'll give you 3 examples to understand the context of PICO. So your question could be an incidence question or a prevalence question where you are just looking at the burden of a given condition. Or you could be looking at the effectiveness of a certain therapy or the yield of a certain screening test or the diagnostic accuracy of a screening test or prognosis, or you could be testing etiology. You could want to see, say, what causes what, a causal question if you have it in mind. So I've just given some examples. I don't intend to go into the detail of that. Just quickly, if you're looking most commonly, you are a clinician. So most commonly you are looking at a therapy question. Is exercise effective in improving quality of life in persons with COPD? So there is a certain treatment, there is a certain condition, and you want to see whether it helps in that condition in terms of a particular outcome or a parameter. In this question, it is quality of life. So because we're talking about systematic reviews, generally, when your review question is to look at incidence or prevalence or burden estimation, you're generally going to be including surveys or cohort studies. But when yours is a therapy question or a screening test related question or a diagnostic accuracy question, mostly you are going to include clinical trials, because that is where that is the primary study design from where, that's the holy grail of testing the effectiveness or safety of a given treatment. Etiology questions, generally they are answered by observational study designs. It could be cohort studies or case control designs. So let us look at the first example. I've taken a prevalence question for the first example. So though I have given you a PICOT format, so not always do you have an intervention and a comparator, especially when you're just estimating a burden of some condition in a given population. You're just going to have the population. So in this case, they've said they're looking at women from Latin American and Caribbean countries. And because it is looking at prevalence of some condition, there's no intervention, there's no comparator, but they have specified outcomes. So they're looking at global and type-specific HPV prevalence. That is, the burden of what they're measuring is this. The study designs they've chosen to include are descriptive epidemiological study designs. There's no intervention idea here. We're just looking at burden of HPV prevalence. We're looking at HPV prevalence. And they've screened all databases up to December 2009. I presume that's the year of publication. So this is a study we're talking about. So they've looked at type-specific HPV prevalence in cervical cancer and high-grade lesions in Latin America and Caribbean, a systematic review and meta-analysis. Now, that is an example of a prevalence study. If you look at a therapy or intervention review, here you are going to have all the elements of a PICOT. So you're going to have a population. So in this case, they've taken women with no history of cervical cancer. The intervention here is screening using VIA method. The comparator is no screening or standard of care, whatever is the usual standard of care, and outcomes, incidence, and mortality risk ratio. I apologize for the typo. The study designs they've included are any study design that has a comparator group, where they have compared screening with VIA versus no screening with VIA or any standard of care. There was no time frame that has been specified, and they're trying to measure the incidence and mortality risk among women who underwent screening and women who did not undergo screening. So this is a publication where they've looked at effectiveness of VIA screening on cervical cancer incidence and mortality, a systematic review and meta-analysis. The third example is an etiology question. So here we are in the PICOT, we may not have an intervention, but we will have an exposure. So it's more of a PICOT than a PICOT. So it's population, which is adult females. Exposure is oral contraceptive use. Comparator is obviously no use, no oral contraceptive use. And the outcome they've looked at is cervical cancer, invasive cervical cancer. The study designs they have included are case control and cohort study designs. The time frame for searches they have specified as follows. So they are looking to see if oral contraceptive use is in any way related to this particular outcome that they have specified. So this is the publication I'm talking about, oral contraceptive use and risk of cervical cancer. So that is the etiological question they're trying to answer in this systematic review and meta-analysis. So that was my quick overview of the PICOT, where you spell out each element of PICOT. And once that is spelled out, it is instantly clear to you, how to frame your search strategy, how to frame what studies to include, what kind of outcomes these studies should have, and these steps become entirely clear to you. Now, I'll quickly take you through basic steps in methodology in a systematic review. So your review, once you've set your mind on doing a systematic review, it is going to evolve through the following steps. So there's going to be a proposal with a preliminary search strategy. A proposal is a very brief document, maybe 2 to 3 pages long. And this is followed by a protocol with your final search strategy. Now, this is a more detailed document where and generally we register protocols so that people all over, when they search, they are aware that you're working on this systematic review and trying to answer this review question. And once you've done with your review, you have the full review report, which you may choose or not to convert it into a publishable manuscript. So very often we skip these steps. There's no directly jumping into a review. You need to have a proposal, you need to refine it and bring it to a more detailed protocol, and then do you proceed. First step, choose your team and choose it wisely. You need to have a subject expert. You need to have a methods expert. And I'm so glad to see that most of you in this meeting are both. You're both subject and methods expert. So an information specialist is going to help you search and retrieve records that will be used in your systematic review. And please decide delegation of responsibilities early on. This is a very crucial step, and this we've learned by experience. Choosing the software, it's not going to be all handwork. So you need to use a software which will help you to import your searches, help you screen, help you extract data, help you do analysis, also help you in report generation. I've given you only a couple of examples. I've given you Covidence and RevMan. RevMan, though, is used only for mostly for intervention reviews. And you can have Rayan, which is an open access one, but again, it cannot be used in more than 2 of the steps that I have specified here, whereas the others help you go through almost all the steps that I've listed here. Then you frame the review question. So you've chosen your team, you've decided which software you're going to work with throughout your review process. You need to have your review question, which we've just seen how to frame. And then you have listed specific objectives. Then you do your searches. And the first step is having a very detailed search strategy, which is reviewed by an information specialist. And once you have a search strategy for a given database, you need to adapt it to other databases that you will be searching. Make a judgment on how many databases you will be searching, and your take on gray and unpublished literature, any date, time frame, population, language restrictions, all that. Then you actually screen. So you have your search results. There will be duplicates because you will be searching multiple databases. Remove the duplicates, and there can be multiple publications from a single study. So we link multiple reports to a single study. You decide on inclusion and exclusion criteria, what kind of studies make it into your review and what kind don't. You do a title and abstract screening, and those studies that cross that stage are subjected to a full text screening, and those that cross the full text screening stage will come for data extraction. Keep it clear as to the reasons of exclusion, because you will later need it to build your Prisma chart. Always screen in duplicate, which means 2 people will be screening, and you can settle disagreements by resorting to a third reviewer. Once you have the list of articles that you have made it into your systematic review, you assess quality. Dr. Radhika alluded to the different kinds of review. So there are some kinds of review where you don't have to do quality assessment, but in a systematic review, you generally do a quality assessment. And once the studies that satisfy quality criteria are in your hand, then you extract your data using a piloted data extraction form. There is no overemphasizing the need to pilot your data extraction form so that you don't keep going back and forth to your studies to extract data that you left out. Again, data extraction is done by 2 people and using a third person to resolve any disagreements. Then you come out with your analysis. I'm sure Dr. Rizwan is going to talk more in detail about the analysis. You come out with the report and the completed review, and your report is ready, your manuscript is ready for publication. If you are budgeting for your review, I really need you to keep these points in mind, because systematic review they also involve money. It doesn't happen free of cost. Budget for manpower or expertise cost, a consultant's time, budget for it. Budget for your software subscriptions, budget for your open access or article retrieval costs. You need to pay for some full text. Budget for your contingency, and also budget for the publication cost of your review. Once you want to publish your review, you need to have the publication costs in place for it. So yeah, so my take home message is for you, if you're able to remember PCOT, and PCOT is different for a prevalence question, different for a therapy question, and different for an etiology question. Please put it in place beautifully and give as much detail, spend more time in framing your review questions so that you don't lose track later. And I have broadly given you an outline of the basic steps in carrying out a systematic review. I am happy to take any questions or answer any queries that are there in the chat box. I'll be around for a while. So thank you, and over to the organizers now.
Thank you, Dr. Jayashree. May I request Swana ma'am once again to kindly give her expert comments?
I'm really quite impressed with the presentation, and it was the most needed presentation for us, the gynecologists who are interested in doing research and presenting on publishing the systematic reviews. And so many things you have enlightened upon, that it's not just free of cost. Like, you have to keep some budget for every systematic review that you wish to publish, and you need some specialists for to assist you in the entire process. So I just had a question, why information specialist? What do you mean information specialist? That do you intend to involve a non-doctor information IT professionals, or what is it like?
Thank you for the query, ma'am. By information specialist, I mean a trained librarian, and not all librarians will be able to do that for you. But there are librarians who can help you with the searches. They help you refine your search strategy. They also help you in the entire process of retrieval of records, because it can get really complicated, and it may not always be possible for the methods or the subject expert to keep track of it.
Okay, great. So that means a librarian would be the one whom we sort, like, and the librarian should be with a certain educational backup, because we have so many librarians in ordinary libraries who are really not much trained and who may not have that kind of expert knowledge. when we go and approach them, because it has happened with me earlier. So I think you enlightened the audience regarding that, how trained the person should be, because it's most vital, person for conducting a systematic review. So can you just enlighten them?
Ma'am, what in our experience, you're very correct in what you're saying. Not all librarians, like while I was in PJ, we had an excellently trained librarian who could just, she would ask questions that we didn't have answers for. So we had that kind of people also. But when I shifted institutes, I found the need to take the librarian on board first. And he or she may learn with you in the process of the first 1 or 2 reviewers, because you may not always get access to or get to collaborate with a person who's already trained in the process. But it's a good idea to take your institute librarian on board. They can have, the kind of training that I'm sure, like, I can see Dr. Vasumati's message there. So yeah, people like that. So a lot of resources are available for them to learn, but a good start would be to involve them in your reviews by default. They are part of your team and they will learn on the job, and slowly, they will be able to handle it by themselves, and, they will add so much value to your review process. That is what we've been doing, and we've had good results with that.
Ma'am, kindly unmute. Ma'am, kindly unmute.
No, Dr. Suvarna, you are muted actually.
Suvarna ma'am, kindly unmute.
No, the control is with the,
you are unmuted.
Yeah, I got it unmuted. So what happens is, I'm aware that the PGI Chandigarh team is expert, and there is an excellent team that support, because I've seen a few reviews that have been published. So I'm sure they must be having an excellent, but all, institutes do not have this kind of expert people to assist in systematic review. As a editor-in-chief of Jogi, I'm sure Radhika has submitted a very good systematic review. I remember many years ago. But, when I had requested certain people to submit a systematic review, they said they could not because of lack of some expert assistance. So I think the message goes down that you must have good people to help you, and you must have enough funds to conduct systematic, how much ever research oriented question mind you have, and a very good research question you have, to complete the systematic review must have all these in place. So thank you so much, doctor. It was a wonderful lecture.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Ma'am, always ask for money and always ask for more money, ma'am.
True.
So that was an excellent session, as we cannot find any questions in our chat box. All the very good comments for this lucid presentation. So I must thank our esteemed chairpersons and our learned speakers for this excellent informative session, and we'll move ahead to our next session. So moving on to our next session, may I now invite the chairpersons. First, Dr. Vasumati Sri Ganesh, a former medical librarian, Hinduja Hospital. Madam Radhika ma'am, kindly share the TVs. Yes, ma'am, please. Dr. Vasumati Sri Ganesh, former medical librarian, Hinduja Hospital and Help Mumbai, founder and CEO, QMed Knowledge Foundation Mumbai. She is the creator of 4 online courses on information resources and literature search. She has expertise in systemic reviews, searching, duplicates, and reference management. So I must welcome such a learned and experienced person on this subject. Then we have Dr. Charmila Ayavu, Vice President-elect FOGSI. Madam is also ICOG Governing Council member for year 2021-23. Madam has been chairperson CRC FOGSI 2016-18. Madam is also national coordinator for many FOGSI programs and is also past secretary of Trichy OBGYN Society. I welcome Sharmila ma'am. And finally, we have Professor N. Srikumaran Nair, Sir is PhD, IIT Delhi, and Professor and Head of Department of Biostatistics, JIPMER, Puducherry. Sir is also President-elect Indian Society for Medical Statistics. Sir has a very strong association with Cochrane through various groups and committees. Sir has expertise in multivariate analysis, multivariate statistical methods and meta-analysis, and a Bayesian method and meta-analysis. I welcome you, sir, to this session. And may I now request our chairpersons to conduct the session. And once again, I request all the attendees to put their queries in chat box if they have any. So handing over the session to our chairpersons. May I request the chairpersons to introduce Dr. Rizwan.
Can I take it on?
Yes, ma'am. Please.
So as you can see on the slide here, Dr. Rizwan is a scientist from the ICMR NIE. He's done his MD in community medicine from AIMS, and you can see the rest of the stuff here. But I went on to his LinkedIn profile and found something very interesting, that he has interest in seeing that everybody in India gets access to evidence-based healthcare, equitable access all across, which means he really wants to reach out to 1.4 billion people. And I would only wish him all the best, and I'm waiting to hear him speak on my favorite topic. So please go ahead, Dr. Rizwan.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Basmati. And thank you very much for kind invitation. And it is really a pleasure, and it is my honor to be delivering this talk in this August presence. So I'll be sharing my screen now. I have two presentations to make. The first one is about the literature search, and the second one is the basics of meta-analysis. So the first session is on how to conduct a literature search for systematic reviews. We might do literature search for a lot of purposes, but today's talk will be on doing a literature search for specifically for systematic reviews. At the end of this session, one should be able to build a search strategy for a given research question. Whatever research question that you have finalized, you have to use that research question to build a search strategy. And using that search strategy, you conduct a literature search in PubMed. PubMed is one of the many databases that we use for conducting a literature search in systematic reviews. I'm going to do a little hands-on demonstration for PubMed alone, but the principles that we discuss along the way will be similar to other databases such as Embase or Google Scholar or Chinal or PsycInfo, etc. So what is a literature search? It is a systematic and reproducible way of doing a literature search for a given research question. So this is very important. When we say systematic reviews, we emphasize that it is a methodological process. It has a written protocol which has to be adhered to strictly, and therefore it is reproducible. And since it is reproducible, the quality of information which is coming out of systematic review is considered to be of high value. So the 2 points are the 2 words that we have to look after are systematic method and reproducible. And since it is, we are going to write a manuscript, we are documenting the process of conducting that literature search. For a systematic review, the basic requirement is at least 2 electronic databases should be used for looking for literature. The ones in green are free, the other ones are paid. So you need a subscription to access those databases. PubMed is free, Embase is paid, Cochrane Register is free for India, Clinical Trials Registry, Web of Science, Scopus, Biological Abstracts are all paid. Google Scholar, as we all know, is a free search engine. There are some subject-specific databases like PsycInfo for psychiatry and education-related research, Chinal for nursing-related and allied health-related literature, and LELAX for Latin American literature. Apart from these, there are some gray literature databases. So these gray literature means those papers or those articles or those theses or dissertations which are not published in mainstream journals, but they are stored away somewhere in a library, somewhere in some other library situations where it is not easily accessible via the internet. So there are some ways and workarounds where we can access those gray literature databases as well. And every database has their own method of searching for literature. We are going to see PubMed today, and it would be really a learning experience for you to go back and see how to do literature search in some of the other databases. Basically, it is a combination of keywords and how we use those combinations to search for literature. So how to do this literature search? Is there a roadmap, or is there a guidance, or is there a way? I would like to basically break the process of doing a literature search into 3 parts. First part is obviously Dr. Jayashree's lecture has emphasized the need for preparing or having a proper research question. That is the first step. Without research question, there is no point in moving forward. Then break the research question into concepts. These are nothing but your PCOT, population, intervention, comparison, outcomes, etc. The third step is identifying the synonyms or the keywords that we are going to use to represent those concepts. For example, a concept may be uterine fibroid. Okay, so you have to identify all those synonyms which are used by authors to publish articles on uterine fibroid. With my basic MBBS OG training, I will be able to say myoma, leiomyoma, fibroid. These are some of the synonyms which authors usually use to describe uterine fibroid, right? So we have to capture all those variations for that particular concept. Then an important thing that I would like you to focus on is something known as MESH. MESH is medical subject heading, and PubMed uses MESH. You can think of it as a dictionary or a vocabulary, which PubMed uses to index articles into their database. So these are controlled vocabularies. MESH is decided by PubMed, and if there is a MESH term, it means that a human has read an article and they have decided to put that article under a particular MESH term. This is called tagging. They tag articles based on the content of that article and they put it under MESH term. So if we use MESH terms, we are likely to get highly relevant results, which may otherwise be very difficult to sort from a lot of junk that you might get. Similarly, Embase uses something called M3 terms. These are special terms, and I will show you how to use these terms when doing the literature search. So here I have shown you an example. The research question that I have taken is to compare the operating time of 2 surgical techniques, namely vaginal hysterectomy and laparoscopic hysterectomy. So all literature published ever comparing these 2 techniques, vaginal hysterectomy and laparoscopic hysterectomy, and I want to see what is the operating time of these 2 procedures, and I want to see whether one procedure is quicker than the other. Let us assume that this is the research question. Now, the words or the phrases which I've highlighted in red are the concepts that I was talking to you about in the previous slide. So I break this research question into 3 main concepts. One is operating time, and there are 2 procedures, vaginal hysterectomy as well as laparoscopic hysterectomy. So if I were to construct the PCOT for this, the population will be women who require hysterectomy. The intervention will be laparoscopic hysterectomy. The comparison will be vaginal hysterectomy, and the outcome will be operating time. And I'm going to include only RCTs, let us assume. So step 1 is done. Step 2 is breaking into concepts, which I have already done, vaginal hysterectomy, laparoscopic hysterectomy, and operating time. So the third step, if you remember, is to identify the synonyms for these concepts. So I want to know what are all the terms that authors and researchers have used to describe vaginal hysterectomy while publishing their articles. Since 1980 or 1970, terminologies might have changed, right? In 1980s, they might have called it something else. In 2000, they might have changed the terminology. In 2010, some new terminology might have come. So we would like to capture the entire range of variations of keywords that represent a particular concept. Before we go into the step 3, I would like to draw your attention to 2 important concepts while searching for literature in PubMed. There are actually 4 concepts: word search, phrase search, field search, mesh search, and Boolean operator. But I'm going to focus on these 2 because they are really important when doing literature search. One is called field search. So the terms that you see in square brackets, these are the words which we put after the keyword to tell PubMed where you have to search that keyword. So if I say within square brackets mesh, what I'm telling PubMed is search for this keyword, search for the articles which are tagged with this particular mesh keyword. Okay. If I say title abstract following a particular keyword, then I'm telling PubMed that search for articles which have this word either in the title or in the abstract. And if I say all fields, it will look for that word wherever in the article. It might be in discussion, it might be in references, it might be anywhere. So when you use all fields, you are likely to get a lot of irrelevant results. But when you use title abstract, it means that the article is really talking about that particular idea, and therefore you are likely to get more relevant results. And as I said before, using mesh increases the relevance or the match between your intention and the results that you get. And Boolean operator, you must have you must remember from 12th standard physics, where we try to combine different concepts, right? Or from Venn diagrams where we overlap concepts. So there are 3 Boolean operators which are used to combine different concepts. I said that we have to break the research question into different concepts, right? When we type these concepts in PubMed, we have to link them by some words. Those words are called Boolean operators, or, and not. We will see this in much more detail in the next few slides. So let us look at field search. Add an appropriate field next to the keyword. So whatever keyword that we are interested in, we are going to add a field to that. So for example, if I want to search for articles having uterine fibroid in the title, then I would say uterine fibroid within square brackets title. So this is telling PubMed that give me all the articles which have the phrase uterine fibroid in the title. If I want articles which have laparoscopic hysterectomy in the title or abstract, then laparoscopic hysterectomy within square brackets, I say title/abstract. You don't have to type these out. I will show you in PubMed how these come automatically. Then if I want to look for mesh articles on teenage pregnancy, and I want those articles which are only mesh tagged. So now I said that mesh is a vocabulary or a dictionary which PubMed maintains to index articles, right? So there is no teenage pregnancy in the mesh terminology, but there is pregnancy in adolescence, which is a mesh term in PubMed. So if I put pregnancy in adolescence within square brackets mesh terms, I will get all the relevant articles on teenage pregnancy. And how do I know this pregnancy in adolescence is the mesh term for teenage pregnancy? There is a website called Mesh Browser, which tells you where you can type in a concept and find out whether a particular concept or keyword is a mesh term or not. So let us look at how Boolean operators work, because this is really important when we are trying to build the search strategy step by step. So here I have shown you 2 circles. These are part of a Venn diagram. If I say pregnancy wastage, I get 10 articles. Let us assume I get 10 articles in PubMed. And if I type elderly primary, I get 7 articles, right? These are 2 separate searches, but I want articles which are on pregnancy wastage with having elderly primary as a risk factor or a cause or something like that. So if I use pregnancy wastage and elderly primary, what will happen is I will get those articles which are at the intersection of these 2 concepts. So for the sake of argument, I have put 4 here, which means there are 4 articles which are at the intersection of pregnancy wastage and elderly primary. So I will get only these 4 articles. That is how AND works. So AND gives us the combination of these 2 keywords as an intersection. So these 4 articles will have both these concepts. It will have pregnancy wastage as well as elderly primary. But if I use OR to connect these 2 terms, what will happen? You must have judged by now that if I use pregnancy wastage or elderly primary, I'm going to get the complete set. I'm going to get this part also, which is only on pregnancy wastage, this part also, which is only on elderly primary, and the center part also, which is on both. But this 4 will be counted 2 times, right? As a part of pregnancy wastage as well as a part of elderly primary. So we have to subtract it once. So 10 plus 7 minus 4, we'll get 13 articles, which is the combination of all this. So when you use or, you are increasing the number of results that you will get. When you use and, you are restricting the number of results that you will get. So when do we use or when do we use and? Before we answer that question, I just, for the sake of completion, if you use not, the term that is after not will be excluded in your search. So you must have judged by now that this part, this circle will be excluded from your search result. So all articles which are talking only about pregnancy wastage will be included. So 10 minus 4 will give 6. So this part of this, the bigger circle, only that part of pregnancy wastage. So when do we use or, when do we use and? When we are trying to combine different concepts, then we use and. If we are trying to combine synonyms or keywords for the same concept, then we use or. For example, as I said in the beginning, I want articles on uterine fibroid, but authors do not always use the word uterine fibroid. They use variations. Sometimes they call it leiomyoma, sometimes they call it myoma. So if I search for these three words separately, let us assume that I get these results, 55 and so on. But if I use the Boolean operator or to combine these three words, what I will get? There will be an intersection of articles which are having all three keywords. So I will get 50 plus 5 plus 3 minus 2, because this one gets counted 3 times. I'm going to subtract it 2 times, and then remaining 1 time it will be there. So here you can see, if I had used only uterine fibroid, I would have got 50 articles. If I had used the word myoma alone, I would have got only 3 articles. If I had used the word leiomyoma alone, I would have got just 5 articles. But by increasing the number of synonyms or increasing the number of variations of a particular concept, I'm able to increase, or I'm able to capture more articles in my search strategy. So this is the beauty of OR, that you spread a wider net to capture almost all the articles which are published. So here, let us continue with the step. Step 3 is identifying the keywords. So we broke the research question into 3 concepts, right? Vaginal hysterectomy, laparoscopic hysterectomy, and operating time. So I have made an effort to go and search in the mesh browser. Is there a mesh term for vaginal hysterectomy? Of course, there is a mesh term. It is written as hysterectomy, vaginal. And some other keywords which I want to search for are vaginal hysterectomy itself and call for hysterectomy, which was an earlier term used for this particular procedure. Laparoscopic hysterectomy does not have an equivalent mesh term, so there is nothing. So I'm going to use the word as such. Operating time has a mesh word. It is called operative time. And some variations I have used here just for the sake of example. Operation time or duration of surgery. Now, if you had understood my previous slide correctly, you will now tell me what Boolean operator I should use to combine these concepts, right? I'm going to combine this mesh term with these other keywords. What Boolean operator should I use? I should use OR, right? So across the same concept, when we are looking at synonyms, we use the Boolean operator OR, but when we are trying to combine across the different concepts, then we use the Boolean operator AND. So if I want to combine vaginal hysterectomy and laparoscopic hysterectomy and operative time, I will get articles which are combining vaginal hysterectomy versus comparing vaginal hysterectomy versus laparoscopic procedure, and they have looked at operative time as an outcome. So this way we build the search strategy. So I will quickly jump to a PubMed demonstration. So once you are in Google, type PubMed, and I'll also show you mesh browser. So mesh browser is the place where you go to check whether the research question concept that you have has an equivalent mesh term or not. So I said operative time is a mesh term, right? So if I simply click operative time, and if I click all fragments, it will tell me whether there is a mesh term or not. So indeed, there is a mesh term for operative time. And you can read the scope note here to understand what it means. Is it the same thing that you want, or is it something different? So this way we identify the mesh terms. There are different ways of doing PubMed. Within PubMed also you can do mesh search to identify mesh words, but this is one of the way to identify mesh terms. So once we go to PubMed, people usually have the habit of directly typing away in this white box whatever they want to search, but I would advise against that. So where we go is we go to advanced, and here you have much more flexibility to build your search strategy step by step. So I'm going to show you how we build a search strategy in a systematic and stepwise manner. So I said that there is a mesh term called hysterectomy, vaginal, right? So here you can see a drop-down menu where you can select what field you want to search. So I know that hysterectomy vaginal is a mesh term. It's a good idea to put quotation marks to tell PubMed that these two words are part of the same phrase. They are not separate. So that quotation mark helps PubMed to search them together and not independently. And you click on add. So you can see this square bracket. It has been added here automatically. You did not have to type it out. So instead of clicking search, we say add to history. So for the time being, it is added to the PubMed history. So you can see there are 3,114 articles which are tagged with the mesh term hysterectomy, vaginal. So then we add a couple of synonyms for vaginal hysterectomy, right? So I'm simply going to type vaginal hysterectomy. And I'm going to put quotation marks to let PubMed know that it is the same phrase. This is not a mesh term, but I want, PubMed to search only in the title abstract of the article. Okay, because I want highly relevant results. If the article's title or the article's abstract has this word, only then I want that article. I don't want an article which talks about vaginal hysterectomy in the discussion or as a reference. So I say add, and I say add to history. Okay, for the sake of example, I will now combine these two terms. So number 1 and number 2 have to be combined using a Boolean operator. And if you remember, when we are combining synonyms, when we are combining within a concept, we use the Boolean operator or. So I'm simply going to type the hashtag 1 or hashtag 2. So what I'm telling PubMed is, okay, you have given me 3,000 odd articles for the mesh term and 3,500 odd articles for vaginal hysterectomy, but give me together of both these terms. So you will expect more results than the individual terms, right? So there are 4,600 odd articles which combine this particular concept. Then we move to the next concept, which is laparoscopic hysterectomy. In the interest of time, I will just add one title abstract. There is no mesh term for laparoscopic.
You need to add an A after LAP.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. So laparoscopic hysterectomy, add to history. So there are 2,454 articles. This is the second concept. Let us assume it is complete. Then I know for the next concept, operative time is the mesh term. I'm going to add to history. So there are 17,600 articles which talk about operative time. Now the individual concepts have been built. Now we have to combine across concepts. So how to do that? Number 3 represents vaginal hysterectomy. Number 4 represents laparoscopic hysterectomy. And number 5 represents operative time. Now when we combine across concepts, we have to use the Boolean operator and, right? So I will simply type hashtag 3 and hashtag 4. Mind, I am typing the Boolean operator in capitals, which is standard practice. You have to type the Boolean operator in capitals only, but PubMed recognizes small letters also. So 3 and 4 and 5, I'm telling PubMed, give me all the articles which are having all these 3 concepts. Add to history. So there are 45 articles which are looking at the comparison of these 2 techniques for operative time. Now is the time to go ahead and see these 45 articles, whether they are really the ones that are relevant to us. So as you can see, total hysterectomy versus vaginal hysterectomy as systematic review and meta-analysis. There you can scroll down and see how much relevant they are to you. So that is briefly the PubMed demonstration. I'll go back to the slides.
So meanwhile, I think audience, if there are any queries, kindly type them in the chat box.
So what I'm trying to do here is just to show search strategies from published papers. And I want you to guess what could be the objective of this search strategy. If you have any answers, you can please type away in the chat box. Otherwise, I will give you the answers. So here is an example of a published, from a published article. I have taken the search strategy alone and I have given here. You might see some new terms like TW, there are some stars. So those are further details on how a particular search has been carried out. But from looking at the terms, you can have a fairly good idea. So the first concept is uterine cervical neoplasms. The second term talks about carcinoma, cancer, SIN, and some other scoring systems. Then they are combining 1 and 2. Then the fourth serial number says mass screening or early diagnosis or early detection. The fifth serial number says mortality or incidence or death. So from this, you can get a rough idea that somebody is trying to see whether cervical cancer screening for the population is going to reduce mortality or incidence, right? So this is from my own publication, where we try to look at the effectiveness of VIA screening on cervical cancer mortality and incidence. So this is another example of a published search strategy. Here you can see I have color coded the different concepts so that it is clear which terms stick together. There is risk assessment, risk stratification, prediction, prognosis, decision, statistical model, logistic model, and there is a bunch on postpartum hemorrhage, postpartum bleeding, post-delivery hemorrhage, and there is model, tool, scoring. And seems like they are trying to see, is there any sort of a model for detecting postpartum hemorrhage. So the objective of this review was to identify and appraise studies which develop prognostic models that can predict the chance of postpartum hemorrhage in pregnant women. Another example, endometriosis, the intestinal flora, enterotype, pathogen, probiotic, phylotype microorganisms. So it has something to do with endometriosis and the gut bacteria. So the objective of this review was to understand the bidirectional interaction between microbiome and endometriosis. So I'll just skip a few of the examples in the interest of time. I don't think we have enough time to do a practical exercise, which I will probably leave the slides with the organizers later on. You could, if you have time, you can do the same. I just want to point you to some additional resources. Mrs. Vasumati is here, and I have been always an admirer of her course, which is this one, which is freely available in YouTube. It is developed, it was produced as part of the Union course. It is a very, very informative, detailed short course on how to do a PubMed literature search. The videos are very short. They are very easy to grasp. What I have tried to do is summarize all of this into a 20-30 minute lecture, which is very difficult in itself. But if somebody wants more detail, they can go through this short course to understand more. So that brings me to the end of the first presentation. If there are any questions, I would be more than happy to answer. If there are none, then let me know. I can move to the next.
I just wanted to add a brief comment, Rizwan. I think it was a very well presented part of the literature search, very difficult subject. And I just wanted to also add to this point about PICO, there could also be a time frame. For instance, the laparoscopy and the vaginal hysterectomy, there could have been a time, especially when you showed the results on the PubMed. So the filters are there. So the readers can also have a look at the filters, which is very easy to, today it gives you a visual impression of the kind of literature and the numbers which are present over a period of time. So even that is possible. So that is called as PCOT. So when you have the time frame attached to the research question, so that is also a possibility, depending on what has been the process, the development, the technicalities. For instance, laparoscopy probably was not so popular, say 20 years from today or 25 years from today. So I just wanted to highlight that point. Thank you.
Yes. So you rightly pointed out, I only touched about 3 concepts, but there are more than 3
Many
things that
more.
you can add, and there are filters also, which PubMed allows you to drill down and focus more to the relevant literature. Yeah, I will share the links to the course. One of the link is to the course by Mrs. Vasumati, and the other link is my own lecture, which is a little bit more detailed than what I have covered here, which is also really helpful if you are a beginner.
If there are no questions, I would like to add a couple of points. So first thing is the union course shows the old PubMed.
Yeah.
If I've put in a link to our current e-learning courses. There are 2 free courses where you first learn the basics of how to use those Boolean operators, everything in proper detail, how do you use mesh, etc. And then there's a very detailed PubMed course. When you see that, you'll almost think that Dr. Rizwan has done it, because a lot of things I realize we've used so much of the same stuff. Of course, probably you may have got some inspiration from the union thing, but it was like deja vu seeing how we think so similarly.
Right.
That is one point. Dr. Rizwan, to one point for you is laparoscopic hysterectomy. You said there are no mesh words, but you need to combine laparoscopy mesh and hysterectomy mesh.
Right.
You get
right.
them. So
right.
What I'd like to tell everybody is that when you're doing a search for a systematic, is not to get only relevant ones. You've got to see that you don't miss anything. So in fact, there could be times when you retrieve 5,000 and only 15 will be relevant, rather studies that you want to include. Maybe 100 will be relevant. Out of that, only 15. But that is the level you've got to go to show that you have not missed any study. That's the point.
Right.
So there are some things I would, urge to improve upon some of those things. But that's about it. Overall, I think it was beautifully presented and very nicely done.
Thank you.
Any other panelists would like to add anything?
I think there was a query by Dr. Monica. She was wanting a clarification on, was it the Boolean operators or the keywords?
Yeah, Boolean, or she asked to repeat.
So should we take that at the end of the session? I think everyone can go to the next part of the talk. And since that is the only question, you can probably respond to that after the next talk.
Sure. So I'll just share my next presentation. This is going to be a little technical, and it is going to be a little math heavy, but meta-analysis is like that. So please bear with me and stay with me. I'll try my best to cajole you into understanding some of the basic concepts about meta-analysis. So at the end of this lecture, you should be able to understand the basic math behind meta-analysis, describe and interpret a forest plot, define heterogeneity and explain how to detect it in meta-analysis, identify situations where a subgroup analysis is needed, and understand the importance of something known as sensitivity analysis. So meta-analysis is nothing but a technique, a statistical technique or method that combines results from different studies which are on the same research question. So as we all know, that there might be multiple studies on one particular research question, and we want to make sense of all of those articles in one common way. For example, metformin for inducing ovulation in PCOS. This is a topic which is very close to my heart because my wife is a sufferer of PCOS. So what does the literature say on the use of metformin for the treatment of PCOS for ovulation? So there are many trials published on the effectiveness of metformin on ovulation. for ovulation in PCOS. Some say it is effective, some say it is not effective. So you are splitting your hairs to know whether does it really work or not. This is just an example. I know it has come into guidelines now, but think of this in like 10 years before or 15 years before when the evidence was not there. We want to combine the results from all these trials. How do we achieve this? Can we take an average of the results similar to taking an average of 3 BP readings? Is that possible? Let us see. So here I have shown you 7 trials which were published between 1996 and 2002 on the same topic. So all of these trials have compared metformin with placebo for ovulation rate in PCOS. And the results are shown in the second column, which is the odds ratio for ovulation rate. So if the odds ratio is greater than 1, it means metformin has a higher ovulation rate compared to placebo. So for example, just to refresh our basics, 2.51 means people who take metformin have 2.5 times higher odds of ovulating compared to women who did not take metformin or who took placebo, and all of these women have PCOS. So you can see some studies have reported as high as 9.8, whereas some studies like NG 2001 has reported 1, which means that both the groups are same. There is no difference. So now one might be tempted to think, if I can add all these odds ratios and take an average, that would in some way make sense, right? A simple mean. But is that what we should be doing? Of course not. That is not. It is not as simple as that. So let me give you another piece of information which will probably help you understand why we don't go that way. I just showed here the sample size of each of these trials. So some trials are very small, like 18. Some trials are large, which have included up to 92 patients. So this means that trials are not equal, right? Some trials bring in more information than some other trials. For example, I would not place much emphasis on NG 2001 because it has only included 18 patients, whereas I will be inclined to give more importance to Fleming 2002 because they have studied 92 women. So we have to incorporate this variation in information contained between the trials to do some sort of justice to the size. So that we do that by calculating something known as weight. So weight is you can consider it as the importance given to a particular trial in a particular research question. So as you can see, the larger sample size has got a larger weight, whereas smaller sample size articles have a smaller weight. It is not as simple as that. We do a lot of incorporation of something known as variance, and I will show you briefly how this weight is calculated. So once weight is calculated, then we calculate the weighted mean. So this 3.88 is the average of all these 7 trials as a weighted mean or a weighted average. And that makes much more sense when we are, statistically speaking, when we are trying to combine results. Now, how did I calculate this weight? This is calculated by something known as inverse variance weighting. So we calculate the variance of each study, which is nothing but the square of the standard error. And 1 upon the square of the standard error is called weight. Okay. Now that weight, the way in which you calculate the weight determines the method of the systematic meta-analysis. So if I use a particular weighting method, I will call it fixed effects. If I use another method, I will call it random effects, and so on and so forth. There are minor variations on how we calculate these weights. But basically, we calculate weight, which is nothing but an inverse of the variance of that particular study. And we use that weight to multiply the result of that trial, and then we take a combined average. An important terminology to understand is effect size. So effect size is nothing but, in plain language, the result of a particular trial. So you know that different studies will have different types of outcomes, right? So if you're talking about case control study or cohort study, they will be giving results in odds ratio, relative risk difference. If you're talking about some continuous measure like scoring, then there will be a mean difference or standardized mean difference. Again, ordinal data will also have mean difference or standardized mean difference. There could be counts out of how many women, how many had anemia, out of how many women who underwent a particular procedure, how many developed complications. So those sorts of questions will be incidence prevalence, which are counts and proportions. And then there are time to event outcomes like hazard ratio, incidence rate ratio. So depending upon a research question, you will select the appropriate effect size to combine. That is the math behind meta-analysis. Now I'm going to focus on the next few slides will be on forest plot. So what is a forest plot? It is a graphical representation of the results of a meta-analysis. And it has some basic parts which I have shown here. So there is a horizontal axis, which is the axis which tells you about the range of the individual results. So this vertical line is the line of no effect. So for an odds ratio scale, the vertical line will be drawn at 1. If you are talking about risk difference, then this vertical line will be at 0. So there is a horizontal axis, there is a vertical line of null effect, and here the numbers represent the results of the individual study. So here the scale is odds ratio or relative risk. So therefore the null effect is on 1. If you're talking about risk difference, then this null effect will be on 0. So this is an example of a published forest plot, and I'm going to take you through the parts of this forest plot. So the first part is the study IDs. So each individual trial has one row in this forest plot. The first column tells you the names of the trials. Then the second set of columns will talk about the participant size. So how many people were there in the treatment arm, how many people were in the control arm, and how many of them got the outcomes. So you can see here 45 people were there, out of whom 37 ovulated. 47 people were here, out of whom 30 ovulated. So this number is translated into this odds ratio 2.51 with the confidence interval. The appropriate weight that was calculated as a result of the meta-analysis is shown. So sometimes you might see here we are talking about n upon n, right? Out of how many women, how many ovulated. But sometimes you can also see outcomes like this: mean with standard deviation in the treatment arm, mean with standard deviation in the control arm. Then the weight column is there. Then the individual study results as extracted from the data, as extracted from the individual articles is shown. Now, let me spend some time on the boxes and the horizontal lines which we see. So the box represents the point estimate of the study. So in the previous Fleming study, we saw that 2.51 was the point estimate. So this black square represents the point estimate, and this horizontal bar represents the 95% confidence interval of that particular study. So each box with a line is for one study. If there are 7 studies, there will be 7 such boxes with 7 such lines. If there are 3 studies, there will be 3. And the size of the box, the bigger the box, the more the weight. So the size of the box is just representing how important that study is. So if a box is very small, it means that the study is not very important to the final pooled result. So here you can see this black box is much bigger than this black box. And you can also have labels for which side is the favorable side for the treatment. So if a box or if the line is on this side of the plot, then it means that that study is saying that treatment is better. If the box lies on this part of the plot, then that study is saying that control is better than the treatment. And if the horizontal line crosses the vertical null line, this horizontal line is the 95% confidence interval, right? So if it crosses the vertical null line, it means that the result of that study is not statistically significant. You can see here, this study, the horizontal line does not cross the null effect. So it means that this study is statistically significant, whereas these 2 studies are not statistically significant. So here I have shown the, I have just enlarged the graphical part of the forest plot. Here you can see there are many studies on the right hand side of the null line, which means that there is more favor for treatment, which is metformin. These 3 lines are crossing the null effect, including this also. They are crossing the null effect, which means that they are saying that there is no statistical difference between metformin and placebo, whereas these 3 studies, they are to the right of the null line, and they are saying that there is a statistically significant effect of metformin on ovulation rate. So this is the point estimate. The ends of the horizontal line represent the 95% confidence interval. That is about the individual studies. Now, this last line represents the result of the meta-analysis, which we have calculated. So it is not available in the literature. This is something that we are calculating. So here we calculate the total. And this diamond represents the pooled effect. The center of the diamond is the point estimate of that pooled effect, and the ends of the diamond represent the 95% confidence interval. So here the pooled effect is 3.88, and the confidence interval is 2.25 to 6.69. So this diamond lies on the right-hand side of the null line, which means that the pooled result is statistically significant. If this diamond had crossed the null effect, it would have meant that there is no statistically significant difference between metformin and placebo. So we always want the diamond to be on one side of the null line. That way we are sure that there is a definite effect on either the placebo group or the control group. So always look for the diamond in the forest plot. I have just blown it up. The center of the diamond represents the point estimate, and the ends of the diamond represent the 95% confidence interval of the pooled estimate that comes after the statistical meta-analysis. And here you can see the test for overall effect, which is p-value less than 0.00001, which means that it is also statistically significant. There is a line here which talks about test for heterogeneity. We will touch upon that in a while. So now, what is heterogeneity? You must have read many systematic reviews, and in all those systematic reviews, they would have talked about something known as heterogeneity. Heterogeneity is a statistical concept which tells us how similar or dissimilar the studies are. If they are very close to each other, if they are all saying the same thing, then we say heterogeneity is less. But if the studies are very different, some studies are completely on the opposite side, some studies are completely on this side, then we say the studies are dissimilar or the heterogeneity is high. High heterogeneity studies means the studies are very different from each other. Low heterogeneity means studies are very similar. It basically depends upon the effect size and the variance of the studies. And why heterogeneity is important is because one is it can help us decide what type of meta-analysis we should do. If there is high heterogeneity, we usually tend to do a random effects meta-analysis. If the heterogeneity is low, we can stick with a fixed effects meta-analysis. If studies are too heterogeneous, there is completely no way of looking these studies as similar, then meta-analysis may not be justified at all. So the common phrase that we use is apples and oranges cannot be combined. Just for the sake of meta-analysis, you should not combine studies into one big pooled effect which has no meaning. So I just want you to look at some of the plots which I'm showing here and see whether you can make a judgment about if they are heterogeneous or not. So look at the forest plot and judge whether the individual studies are similar or not. Here you can see that doesn't matter what is the research question here. Just look at the individual boxes and the horizontal lines and see whether they are all singing the same song or they are very, very different. This is one example. This is another example. Some might tend to say that these studies are more on one side, so therefore they are homogeneous or not low heterogeneity. Here you can see a forest plot which is very heterogeneous, right? There are a bunch of studies on one side and then there are a bunch of studies on the other side. Here one might be tempted to say that almost all the studies are on one side, therefore I don't see any heterogeneity. So since the visual estimation of heterogeneity by looking at the forest plot is not very accurate, because somewhat we might tend to agree on how they look, we have statistical methods, which I will cover shortly. So why do we think that studies are dissimilar? Because studies are not conducted in the same way, right? They don't follow the same protocol. Each study has its own protocol. So difference in study populations, American versus Native American versus Caucasian males or Caucasian women, difference in interventions, difference in study procedures, definitions, difference in time period of studies, difference in technology. The technology that was in the 1980s may not be the same as the technology in 2000s, right? For example, if we say ultrasound, for an example, I'm saying ultrasound for the detection of congenital anomalies. Is it good or bad? Definitely, the technology that was available before 2000 doesn't match the technology which is available in 2020. So these are some of the differences which lead to heterogeneity. And it is very important to understand why those heterogeneities arise. So there are statistical tests which tell us whether heterogeneity is present or not. And there is something known as I-square and tau square. I-square, it's a very rough estimate of how much heterogeneity is there. If it is 25%, we say low heterogeneity, 50% moderate heterogeneity, and 75% we say there is large heterogeneity, more than 75%. So I reserved this particular line in the forest plot for this moment. Here you can see test for heterogeneity is P is equal to 0.42. So the null hypothesis for a test for heterogeneity says there is no heterogeneity. So we want to accept the null hypothesis, which is very rare in statistical methods because we always want to reject the null hypothesis. So this is one situation where we want to accept the null hypothesis, and therefore the p-value should be greater than 0.42. This is one example where they have looked at the long-term cardiometabolic disease risk in women with PCOS. And here you can see how the studies are aligned. Here you can see the heterogeneity value is mentioned here. I-square is 56%, which puts it under moderate heterogeneity. Here the I-square is 0%, which means there is no heterogeneity. So this is how you read a forest plot. This is another example, association between PCOS and autoimmune thyroid disease. So they are looking, this particular study looked at whether having PCOS predicts the presence of autoimmune thyroid disease in women. As you can see, the heterogeneity I-square is 56% for Asia. For Europe, it is 0%. For South America, it is again 0%. And you can see the point estimate here, 4.56, 3.27, 1.86. And the pooled effect of all these studies is 3.27, which means that people who have or women who have PCOS have 3.2 times higher odds of developing autoimmune thyroid disease. This is another example where SARS-CoV-2 infection during pregnancy and preeclampsia. So if somebody gets COVID-19 infection during pregnancy, what is their chance of developing preeclampsia? And you can see here, the pooled estimate is 1.58, which means if you get COVID-19, the odds of developing preeclampsia is 1.5 times compared to those who did not develop the infection. So if there is too much heterogeneity in the studies, how do we handle it? As I said before, it helps us decide what type of meta-analysis we do. The commonest solution is to use a random effects meta-analysis model where we calculate weights in a different way compared to fixed effects meta-analysis. Then we try to separate the apples and the oranges. So as I showed you a few slides before, there were region-wise studies, right? So we cannot combine regions. The American studies are different from Indian studies. So we do analysis separately in those subgroups. And sensitivity analysis. This is equivalent to removing some of the bad apples and making the milkshake only from the good apples. And we see how it tastes or how the results change if we remove some of these studies. So here I've shown you an example of doing fixed effects and random effects meta-analysis when there is no heterogeneity. Actually, this particular meta-analysis has only 1% heterogeneity. So we used fixed effects meta-analysis. But just for the sake of demonstration, I have also applied random effects meta-analysis. And you can see there is no much change, 3.88 compared to 3.89, which means the choice of meta-analysis method does not make a difference. But if there was a significant heterogeneity, this can mean very, very different things when you change the method of analysis. Here is another example where the results change based on the method we use. So a subgroup analysis is the next analysis after we do the pooled meta-analysis to test whether the pooled effect is different across the levels of a subgroup. For example, whether the effect of metformin on PCOS is similar for women aged less than 40 and more than 40. If that is the research question, then you will do a separate analysis for those two age groups. Is the pooled prevalence of low birth weight different between mothers of different gravida status, gravida 1, 2, 3, etc. So here I have shown you, I'm showing you an example of metformin plus ovulation induction agent versus placebo for ovulation rate. So the first subgroup is PCOS and clomiphene sensitive women. The second subgroup is PCOS but clomiphene resistant women. And this third subgroup is clomiphene sensitivity not defined. So we are just separating the studies into different groups. And you can see whether there is any difference between the the way in which metformin acts. So here you can see among clomiphene resistant women, metformin has a significant effect, but when we see among clomiphene sensitive not defined women, there is no effect. I will go back to the same example which I'm using from the beginning. So here we have comparing metformin with placebo for ovulation rate in PCOS. And from the data extraction, you have collected whether the study was done in women less than 40 or more than 40, and you have this age grouping. So now these two will be the subgroups. Just for the sake of demonstration, I have clubbed these two, age less than 40, age more than 40. What does this tell you? This tells you that metformin works only for women less than 40 years of age for ovulation. It does not work for women above 40 years of age. So this is the beauty of doing a subgroup analysis. Then finally, we come to sensitivity analysis to estimate the influence of certain types of studies on the pooled effect. For example, studies which are of poor quality or small sample size may tend to affect the results too much. Studies which are completely different in terms of intervention, mostly removing studies and rerunning the analysis. That is what sensitivity analysis means. But there are some special methods of sensitivity analysis called leave one out analysis and cumulative analysis. So here I'm just showing you an example of from a published article, how they have done the sensitivity analysis. So first, what they have done is exclusion of trials susceptible to inadequate sequence generation during randomization process. So these are trials which are of poor quality. Exclusion of trials susceptible to the surgeon effect. So they have removed some studies which have this effect. Coming back to the example which I was using, if I do a risk of bias analysis for each of the 7 trials, I say that the first 5 trials have low risk of bias, which means they are high quality, and the last 2 studies have high risk of bias, and therefore they are of poorer quality. So I will only include the first 5 trials and drop the last 2 trials and see how the results have changed. So here, instead of the 7 trials, I'm using only the 5 trials. And as you can see, it has now dropped from 3.88 to 3.86. There is not much difference here, but sometimes the difference can be very significant. So these are some additional resources which you can go through to understand much more about the intricacies of doing a meta-analysis. That is very briefly scraping the surface of meta-analysis. If there are more questions or if any further details are required, I'll be happy to answer them. So there is a question in the chat box. Dr. Aparna has asked any significance for the length of the line in forest plot. So there are many lines in forest plot. It would be helpful if you can say which line. The horizontal line, yes, there is a significance. The horizontal line, if it is very long, it means the results are imprecise. It means that it can move from this end to that end, which is not very useful. If the horizontal line is short, it means that the results are very precise. And that also determines to an extent how much weight the study receives. If the study is very precise, we give more weight. If the study is imprecise, we reduce the weight.
So such a wonderful talk, actually, a complex topic made so simple. And actually, we have become fans of research now because of Radhika. She's getting us such wonderful speakers. And every time I sit in the ICOG website trying to understand after each one of your programs, Radhika. One question I had, like you said, the vertical line in a forest plot indicates a null effect. But in one, this thing you showed in the forest plot, a vertical line in the individual studies also. Does it
No,
have any
that is for, there is no vertical line in the individual studies that I have put because I wanted to show the point estimate. There is no vertical line in the individual studies.
Okay. Because other plots did not have, but one had.
Yeah. Right. You are right.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Vasumati, madam, so this thing also was so good. All your inputs, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Would you also like to talk about the keywords, Rizwan? There was a brief.
I'm not able to see the comment exactly. If you can
So
read out.
I think, even I can't see that. So I think Dr. Monica Diwan, she was wanting to basically understand what the keywords are about for the literature search.
If she can unmute and ask, I might be happy to answer.
So I think you had also clarified regarding, you had given that example of a myoma, the fibroid, and so you have the synonymous words, and it was demonstrated in the two examples that was there. So if there is anything specific other than that, we would request you to post your question again, Dr. Monica, unless there was something that you really, we are unable to find your question here.
I could quickly elaborate anyway, if unless this one wants to say something.
Yeah, please, ma'am. I was in fact wanting you to talk on that.
So just like as he gave the example of a leiomyoma or uterine fibroid or myoma, authors might use different terms for the same concept. So you have to think of what all words an author may have used in the title or abstract. What they use in the article doesn't matter when you're doing a PubMed search, because a PubMed search does not go search the full article. It only searches title, abstract, mesh, author, those kind of fields. So you've got to think of what an author might use in the title or abstract. Now, also certain things like I know he had to do it in a very short thing, but laparoscopic hysterectomy, you might have something like laparoscopic and some other word in between and hysterectomy. So you have to think of all those options and see how you can combine. He gave the basic thing, but there's that much think and do that. Now, mesh is a set of words as he described. I'm just repeating that an indexer has used to describe the article. What is the use of that mesh? Suppose there's a title which just says comparing two types of hysterectomies, and they haven't used vaginal, they haven't used laparoscopic, and there's no abstract for some silly reason. Then it's the mesh keywords which will pick it up. That's why you have to do a mesh search as well as that title abstract search. And for mesh, you don't need to think of synonyms because the indexer sees all the different words but will use one standard term. Whereas there are articles in PubMed that don't get mesh terms, and that is why you definitely have to search title abstract. Plus, sometimes there is incorrect indexing in the mesh. So just to be safe, you've got to do both kinds of searches. So synonyms is one, spelling variation. One example he used was hemorrhage. So you have to look at HAE hemorrhage, HE hemorrhage. So you've got to think of, sometimes you may even have to think of wrong spellings that are commonly used. One thing that I see common, not in gynec, I can't think, but asthma, people very often type it as ASTHAME.
Incidentally, in gynecology, it is abruption. Abruptio placentae. So yes, it's very commonly misspelled.
So all those spelling mistakes, you might as well search them out. You never know, one or two might pop up with that.
And just to add one more thing,
this is
plurals,
common. Gynec.
Plurals and the ending variations.
Plurals and ending variations. That's right. So there's really that much more to learn, but
yeah, it's a complete workshop in its own. So I think it was a good teaser. So and thank you, Chamila, for those encouraging words. It's very nice that you are joining us every time. It's a pleasure to have you here. And Dr. Nair is there. Sir, we would like to invite your comments on this.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you, Dr. Radhika. It is a great, I mean, you made sure that it's a 2 hours, you can do a great workshop on systematic review and meta-analysis, everything put together. So congratulations doing it. It's a great thing. In fact, you selected speakers also very well. It's in fact, it's you yourself set tone with the introduction to systematic review, and the basic message is it's bias. That four-letter word, that is the one set role to the systematic review. So either in terms of selection, in terms of search, selecting articles, or final analyzing it, everywhere you are trying we are trying our best to avoid bias. Many times we may not be able to eliminate bias, but we are trying our best to reduce it. That's the one thing it's people should understand. And if we talk about elimination, sometimes we fail it. Okay. Then of course it's the move to Dr. Jayashree. Yes, one of the best talk I heard about PICO, and she touched upon so not only PICO, she moved further to study designs. Okay, within a given short time, talk about the study designs as well as even budgeting. Okay, that usually people won't talk about that. Okay, that's done. And then it's a third one. It's two topics. It's about the search. I don't want to talk anything about search. It's Dr. Vasmati is there. Yes, she spoke. She's something I would say encyclopedia of search. Okay, but then, of course, meta-analysis, it's that is another area. Rizwan, it's you have done a wonderful job in explaining in a very short time about meta-analysis. But there are few more additional points I want to inform the participants. One is there is usually sometimes people use it as systematic review, sometimes people use it as meta-analysis. That is wrong. In fact, I would say systematic review is the base one. And within that systematic review, in case you have numerical quantitative results, you can do a meta-analysis. The other way, what I am telling is, you do a meta-analysis without a systematic review, it's absolutely wrong. It is better don't do anything. Okay. So you do systematic review, make sure that complete the studies, well qualified studies, all brought into one basket. And then, yes, you find a couple of studies which quantitatively measured, then you go for a meta-analysis. So that is what systematic review followed with meta-analysis really talk about evidence. So a meta-analysis without systematic review really misguide you. That is what I wanted to tell you. Okay, that is one thing. And then second thing I wanted to, again, Rizwan touched upon is heterogeneity. In fact, I will add one more point there. When you look at the systematic review, there are three types of heterogeneity can creep in. One is the clinical heterogeneity in terms of he talked about the population and characteristics wise. That is clinical heterogeneity. And another is methodological heterogeneity. For example, you may find some cluster randomized trial, you may find individually randomized trial, like that, various designs applied for answering the same question. That is, we usually call it as methodological heterogeneity. And third one is statistical heterogeneity. In fact, the I-square or tau-square, all those things measure statistical heterogeneity only. It won't talk much about clinical heterogeneity or methodological heterogeneity. So it is better if you are looking for evidence, first background you look at it, there is a clear clinical heterogeneity is there. And if you wanted to do it, probably you can think about a subgroup analysis. Even methodological heterogeneity is there. There also it is, if you feel you can go for a subgroup analysis, in the sense it's a cluster randomized trial, we analyze separately. Sometimes cohort studies we analyze separately, and parallelly individually randomized trials separately. You can decide that. Basically investigator or domain expert have to decide it. Now then comes to the statistical heterogeneity. That is what he talked about, the fixed effect and random effect model. Okay, when you don't have much statistical heterogeneity, it is good to go for a fixed effect model. Even if by mistake you do a random effect model, you get the more or less the same results. That is the reason. So you can go for a fixed effect model. And if you find a significant level of statistical heterogeneity, there are various criteria. Cochrane follow 50% or more, 60% or more towards I square, and various agencies follows various criteria, but a significant amount of statistical heterogeneity is there. One of the way it is suggested is random effect model. You go for a random effect model. Then there is a catch in the random effect model. You must have seen Razvan when he was projecting a slide where you had a random effect model and you had a fixed effect model, both for the same number of studies. What it does is random effect model always move towards non-significant compared to fixed effect model. That means that you can get into a situation, a fixed effect model overall found to be evidence is significant. Okay, that intervention is effective, but a fixed effect, random effect model probably can prove that yes, the intervention is not effective. There can be, means it always move towards the other side. That is why we usually suggest, it is for every systematic review, it is better first to publish a protocol, and protocol you specify very clearly you wanted to have a random effect model or fixed effect model. And when you go for a random effect, when you go for a fixed effect, you have to be very, very clear about that. Okay, so that is very important. And then heterogeneity, yes, of course, he said sensitivity analysis is one thing and subgroup analysis. And in fact, I don't think it's within 30 minutes, anything more about this meta-analysis can be spoken. So really, it was a great talk. Razvan, it's congratulations for making it within 30 minutes, all about meta-analysis. And I think I don't want to add any more point because we are already exceeding time. There are many packages available. For example, the R package, it's free. Stata is also good one to do meta-analysis. Ravman, it is there, but R is the free package nowadays available and people use it. Okay, so any of the package you can use for it. You don't have to go too deep into meta-analysis, but of course, you should know how to interpret that forest plot. That is very, very important. I think I stop here, unless you have, anybody has got any specific question. And I congratulate the organization for really conducting a session on this. Because I recall in the late 90s and early 2000s, when we talked about the systematic review and Cochrane collaboration in India, people said, no, that is not our business. Okay, that Western countries' business. And now almost every association is conducting goes on systematic review and meta-analysis. And ICMR regularly calling for proposal. Yes, so that's a great thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So over to you, Dr. Ranjana, for
yes, madam.
The vote of thanks.
Okay, madam. Yeah. So for the formal vote of thanks, thank you, madam. It is said the best way to predict the future is to create it. And that is so true for our visionary leader, ICOG chair, Dr. Lakshmi Shikhande. The way madam is working hard with a meticulous planning, the academic calendar of ICOG is really mesmerizing. Equally enthusiastic and dynamic is convener of this research methodology webinar series, Radhika madam. Thank you, ma'am, from the core of my heart for making me a part of your team. I would also like to thank FOGSI President, Dr. Hrishikesh Pai, Secretary General, Dr. Madhuri Patel, Vice Chair ICOG, Dr. Parag Biniwale, and Secretary ICOG, Dr. Ashok Kumar, for their support and guidance. And now my most sincere thanks goes to our esteemed chairpersons, Dr. Suvarna Khadilkar ma'am, Dr. Anju Pradhan, Dr. Ashwath Kumar, Dr. Vasumati Shri Ganesh, Dr. Charmila ma'am, Dr. Shri Kumaran Nair, for their expert comments and very interactive sessions. Their inputs were really great. And let us give a big round of applause to our speakers today, Dr. A.G. Radhika, Dr. Jayashri, and Dr. Rizwan. for their lucid presentations. Indeed, we learned a lot. And my heartfelt thanks to all the attendees who made this program a great success. And Dr. Vaishali ma'am, my co-coordinator, needs a special thanks for being so generous and making my job so easy. In the end, special thanks to Nilima, Komal, and all the members of Team ICOG office for their faultless execution of this program. So thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.
So thank you all. Thank you very much. Dr. Lakshmi is there. Would you like to?
Yeah, no,
kindly
as
close
usual,
the
I
session,
will only
please?
say ki Radhika, well done. Your choice of speakers topic was really too good. So see you all next month.
Ma'am, should I stop recording?
Yes, please do that. It was a very difficult topic, and I
know.
was thinking whether people are going to be there, but I'm so happy to see that.